All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Microsoft Learn Live session on threat response with Azure Sentinel playbooks. My name is Jordan Ross, and I'm a program manager in the Cloud Security CXE team. And I'm joined by my amazing teammate, Sarah. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name's Sarah Young, and I'm a senior program manager on the Azure Sentinel Customer Experience Engineering team. And yeah, nice to see you all.
Yes, Sarah and I are joining you from opposite ends of the world. So from whatever time zone you're in, glad that you're here. Today, we are going to be going over the Microsoft Learn course on threat response with Azure Sentinel playbooks. So if you haven't already done this Learn module, don't start now. Stay with us, stay engaged, and be sure to ask questions as we're going. More on that in just a little bit. But if you have already gone through, this will be a great time where Sarah and I walk you through the Learn module and take you through some real-world examples that we've encountered along the way. So through this session, we are going to go through the Learn content and talk about what Azure Sentinel SOAR capabilities really are and how this integrates with the logic apps within Azure and the specific Azure Sentinel Logic Apps connector. And then we're going to have some exercises as we go through. Sarah's going to show you how to create a playbook and maybe run it. I'll jump in there too, and we'll have some knowledge checks all the way through to make sure that you're either following along or if we need to readdress something that we do so. And so the main items that we're going to cover, what are Azure Sentinel playbooks? I hope everyone can walk away with at least that. And then how you can trigger a playbook in real time and run playbooks on demand. And so, I see Kelly is joining from California. I am in California as well. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone out there. And welcome to Learn Live.
Yeah, we've got people from the UK as well. So again, that's the evening for them. Oh, hello from Sweden.
I wish I was there.
It's quite late for you now, if my time zones are right. I'm in New Zealand, so it's the morning, Thursday morning for me.
Okay, and so, some of y'all are already commenting, where you're from, where you're joining us from, but make sure that you also use the chat window to ask questions as you're going along with us through this session. And a great reason to do so is not only do you have Sarah and myself, we are joined by some of our amazing teammates in the chat window where they are going to be moderating and responding to your questions and responding to Sarah and I if we get anything wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, which we might well do because this is live. So we'll see if the demo gods are kind to us and all our demos work and we get everything right and our internet doesn't stop. All the things that can sometimes go wrong when you do live things. So
what you can depend on is our teammates moderating your questions. So be sure to ask them there, and we'll address some live as we go through too. So to get started, for those of y'all that may be surprised by this, we are going to be talking about Azure Sentinel. So Sentinel is Microsoft's cloud-based SIEM, and we aren't going to address collection, detection, investigation. So if you're new to Sentinel, I recommend ramping up on the topic first and coming back and viewing this recording. But if you just want to get ahead of the game or you're ready to really talk about how do we respond to threats, that's what we're going to discuss here. And so Sentinel is used to collect in data from a number of different data sources and detect what kind of suspicious activity is occurring. Within this Learn module, Sarah and I are going to be talking about what happens when we are aware of a threat or suspicious activity and we want to do something about it. Specifically, how do we automate these actions? Sarah, anything about this module that you're watching out for or that excites you?
Just automation is just really cool. I'm like, but it's jazz hands. But automation is really, really cool. And it's something that, jazz hands for automation. And, it is something that's really, really cool. It's something that's really, really useful as well, though, rather than just being something that's fun to watch and nice to see in a demo. It really does have some real world, good, solid uses because if you've worked in a SOC or you've done security operations, you know that your SOC analysts end up often doing lots of manual tasks again and again and again that are very repetitive, and they're not very interesting for those SOC analysts to do, but they're important. And so if we can automate a lot of those away using playbooks within Sentinel, it leaves your SOC analyst free to look at those really important things. And I know, Jordan, I'm going to steal your thunder and take this
go for
stat
it.
off you. Let's see if I remember the exact percentage. Is it 44% of alerts never get?
I think that's right. Yeah, that is the great big number of all of these detections coming in, all of these signals. What happens when we don't even have time to investigate?
Yeah, so 44% of alerts never get looked at. So if we can get rid of at least the repetitive, time-consuming tasks where you know what you want to do through automation, it's a great way to, actually make sure you look at all of those 44% of alerts that you may have missed, because it might be something really important.
Absolutely. So to get started, do you want to set the groundwork for what we're going to do here? Because the way the Learn module starts off with, there are some exercises when we want to automate the response for that orchestrated and automated response. But to be able to make use of this, our audience needs to be able to, one, have a workspace, two, have Sentinel, have resources within it, and actually be able to have an incident occur. So they need an analytic rule. Want to show us?
Yes, I definitely do. So here is my Azure subscription. Now, if you are following along with us, you'll see that in the threat response with Azure Sentinel.
And can we see your screen, or are you sharing?
Oh, am I not sharing? There you go. Look.
No worries.
There you go. It didn't take me very long to mess up this morning. So let me share my screen. Hopefully you all can see that now. What we're going to do here is we're just going through the Unit 2 in the threat response with Sentinel playbooks. And you'll see that the first thing it says is to deploy to Sentinel. So I'm going to click on this deploy to Azure link. What it's going to do. Oh, really? Oh, look at that. It needs me to sign in again. How excellent.
And right now, Sarah, we're actually looking at your Azure Sentinel overview page.
Oh, that is excellent, Jordan. I'm having a good tech. I'm having an excellent tech day today. Let's do this a different way. Let's see. Now, better?
Yes, we can see the custom deployment.
So I'll go back again for a second. I'll just reverse a bit. So what I'm doing here is I'm in Unit 2 of the create a Sentinel playbook. And you can see here our first task is deploy Azure Sentinel. So what I've done is click on this deploy to Azure button. And what you can see here is it takes us to the ARM template. Now, don't worry too much about ARM templates if you're not familiar with them. But what happens here is this ARM template that's in the module is actually going to deploy an entire little Sentinel instance for us so that we can work through the rest of the activities. So when you do an ARM template, it will take you to this custom deployment page. What you've got to do here is put in some parameters so we can complete the rest of the deployment for you. So first of all, I'm going to pick my subscription, and then we're going to create a resource group. Now I'm going to create a brand new one. So Sarah, would help if I ignite learn. So it would help, of course, if I could spell my own name there, but I'm going to create a brand new resource group. And the reason I want to do that is because it's just very it's just straightforward, and it keeps all the resources in one place, and we're not going to get muddled with other things. Is that what you do, Jordan?
Yes, absolutely. And the best thing about this customized deployment, you're getting the workspace, you're getting the virtual machine. So all of these resources we need to accomplish this Learn module are going to be packaged into one easy to delete resource group. But on top of that, just with future practice for those of you deploying Sentinel actively, keeping your Sentinel resources, so the playbooks, the workspace, and the connections needed, all in one resource group is just great practice anyways out there. And then I always name mine test or something like that when it comes to a resource group, just so I know that I delete it. So having Ignite right there helps out.
Yeah, test is a good one too. I'm going to do Sarah-Ignite-Learn. I've also just picked my region. So I'm going to go for East US because this is, but of course we do have all our different regions here. You can pick whatever makes sense to you because of course, if you were doing a real life deployment, depending on where you are in the world, you may need to keep your workspace in a particular region. So like we do with other Azure resources, the validation has passed there. And it's given me the parameters that I've entered here, and I'm going to click create. So whilst that ARM template's just deploying, Jordan, do we want to go into the other objectives that we have?
Yeah, so what this is doing, it's deploying the resources that we really need. But what we actually need to do once we have the Sentinel workspace up and running to continue with this Learn module, there's a couple things that we need to do. The Learn module has you go through this detection of seeing when a VM has been deleted. Maybe not something that you want to investigate in your real world SOC all the time, but it is great and easy to be able to test out and simulate your knowledge on the subject. And so we have to make sure that we are receiving that log. So eventually, Sarah's going to go into Sentinel. She'll enable the Azure activity log, and then she will create an analytic rule to actually detect that. For all of those that are going to follow along later on, that analytic rule, the query is already given to you. The steps are actually pretty quite clear within the Learn topic itself, so you shouldn't have a problem going along. But we always have to wait for deployments to actually finish, so we can come back to this later on.
Yeah, and we did have a question, which I think is worth mentioning before we go any further. Someone has asked, can this demo, can this Learn module be done in the free tier? So we don't have a free tier per se in Sentinel, but if you're using your own personal, I'm actually using here my own personal Azure subscription. And as you know, if you have a personal subscription, you do get 200 200 Australian dollars, convert that into your local currency, apologies, to every month to be able to play around and use things in Azure. So I'm actually using my own personal Azure subscription here. So yes, so there isn't a free tier per se, but you certainly can deploy this with no cost. It's also worth mentioning here that if you do use Azure Sentinel and you create a new log analytics workspace in Azure Sentinel, for the first 31 days, you do get, it is free, up to 5 gigabytes of ingestion. And 5 gigabytes for just playing around is quite a lot of data. So, of course, I would definitely encourage you to go set that up and play around with Sentinel and log analytics for that 31 days.
And Sarah and I both come from engineering, so pricing isn't our forte, but one thing to also mention is that, especially for this Learn module, the critical data source is the Azure Activity Log. That, among many others, are free data ingestion sources for Sentinel, so you can still continue to use it.
Exactly. So we can see here my deployment is all finished. So we've got everything done here. And what we can see here is my ARM template has created a log analytics workspace. It's created a virtual machine, some network interfaces, a virtual network. And if I go back and look at Azure Sentinel now, I can see I have my Sentinel workspace, which is Sarah-Ignite-Learn. So that's all just been created for me by the ARM template.
Yeah.
Yeah. So nice and easy to get you started. So Jordan,
but it's empty.
But it is empty at the moment. Yes, it is empty because we've just deployed it.
And so to get data into here, one of the easiest and fastest ways to start is to go under configuration and select the data connectors blade. Once you open that up, the data connector that we actually want to enable here is the Azure Activity Log. And so Sarah's going to navigate over to Azure Activity, and hopefully we have the right permissions to enable this.
I better have the right permissions on my own personal one, but we'll see.
And so if you didn't, it would show a red X and show you that you couldn't enable that.
Yeah, so here we can click on Configure Azure Activity Logs. And here I'm looking at my subscription. And so I'm going to connect my subscription here. And what I'm going to do is connect the activity logs, the Azure activity logs to Azure Sentinel. So you can see here, I've had a successful message up the top. Now, if we go back, we can see here, I'll refresh the page. Something that's worth mentioning here, though, is you can see that at this point in time, when I've just connected Azure Activity, you can see that it does say on the left-hand side here that it's still not connected. I mean, things in Sentinel don't happen quite in real time. So if we give this 5, 10, 15 minutes, when we come back, it should be saying connected, and we'll start to be receiving
Which for a
logs.
SIM is pretty fast, but
Yeah,
there is some refresh time needed. So once we eventually do have this data source connected, we need to enable an analytic rule for it. And so SOAR or playbooks within Sentinel respond to alerts or to incidents. And so we want to make sure that we can actually see an incident. To do so, we need to create a new analytic rule. There are so many templates out there for analytic rules, but for the purpose of this Learn module, we are going to create one from scratch, and it is based off of the query that's actually listed on the Learn module itself. I believe it's in Unit 2 of it, and within that query, it's simply looking within the Azure activity log, is there a activity for deleting a virtual machine detected?
Yeah, so I'm going to call this analytics rule the Ignite Amazing Test rule.
This is the most amazing test rule that I have seen.
Just the most amazing test rule. We can map the MITRE attack tactics to this. Now, deleting a VM, I'd say that looks like execution to me, but of course you're free to pick whatever you want. I can also change the severity if I want here. I'll keep it at medium. And then we're going to put the rule query. Now, those of you who are just watching me, you did see I did a sneaky copy paste from the Learn module, but sometimes that's just a lot easier. But what we're doing here is
type it yourself if you'd like, but
no one wants to watch me type.
You don't want to do it.
Nobody wants to watch me do that. So what we're saying in this rule is that in the Azure activity table, we're looking for where any records where the operation name is delete virtual machine and where the activity status is accepted. We've also done a bit on defining our different entities here. So we've said that the account is the caller column and that the IP is the caller IP address column. Don't have a lot of time to go into detail into what that means in this session, but we have plenty of material on entities. So you can see here we've done the entities, and because it's defined in the query, we see it. It's already covered.
These templates in this unit, they really take care of themselves. It's just a matter of clicking a few buttons, getting the deployment up and running. If you're any at all confused about log management, data ingestion, analytic rules, and creating them, there are other Microsoft Learn modules prior to this one within the Learn track. So I recommend taking a look at those.
Yeah. And then we get down to the query scheduling. You can Sentinel rules can be run as frequently as every minute, as infrequently as like once a day or so. To be honest with you, you need to think about for your organization what makes sense. I'm going to put this at every 5 minutes because why not?
This will give us a chance to actually see this instant occur when you are going through this module. So setting that to 5 minutes makes it a little faster to work through. But I think we're good with the defaults for this.
Yeah, I think so.
Probably once we get this up and running, and I'm going to steal the screen from you for just a bit.
Sure.
I'm sure everyone out there, hey, you've taken us through creating Sentinel, moving through these deployments, but I think they're still wondering, what are Azure Sentinel playbooks?
Yeah,
Could you take us through that?
So so you can see here, I'm not sure if you've stolen the screen off me yet, Jordan, but if you haven't, you can see here that like everything in, just to finish this off.
And of course, did take it from you.
Okay, you did. Okay. So what happened here is I've done the create a new rule in analytics, and we're going to hit create, and we're all done. So that's my little bit of the demo, the setup done, Jordan, but I definitely think we should talk about exactly what a playbook is. So back to you.
Yeah. So Azure Sentinel playbooks are our tool for SOAR. So security, orchestration, automation, and response. And so within the Learn module, we are going through a scenario where Contoso has to monitor new problems and threats, and they need to respond. And so SOAR is really the enablement within our SIEM solution. So Sentinel, again, is security information and event management. I would also argue we need a third acronym over here for UEBA, or User Entity Behavior Analytics. Why not throw all the acronyms in here? But very important functionality to operationalize and make your SOC more efficient as you're going through. What are some SOAR topics that you've come across recently?
Oh, so I think SOAR is the thing everyone's talking about, because SOAR is, SIEM has been around quite a long time compared to SOAR. SOAR is still a relatively new concept. And I think there's a lot of customers trying to understand how they can use it, because precisely what you want to do when a security incident occurs is really going to vary from organization to organization. Some organizations might just want to send an email. Some of them might want to actually do some remediation and take action. And also, businesses change over time as well.
Yeah.
It's often a maturity journey as well, because you need to understand your security operations and your use cases, and then understand how they fit with your operational model to know what you want to do. So I think, please remember, for all of you listening, it's obviously very easy for Jordan and I to sit here and talk to you wherever you are in the world, telling you to do some automation. But in reality, in real life, it's not quite as straightforward as that, and we really do appreciate that, which is why we give so much flexibility in the SOAR space, because it's very much not one size fits all for this.
Yeah, absolutely. And what it does run off of in the background, and there's been some exciting announcements just this week that kind of is contrary to what we're explaining right here, but SOAR is enabled in the backend through Azure Logic Apps. So when you hear security playbooks within Sentinel, that is your tool to enable these SOAR scenarios, and it runs off of Logic Apps. So if you're already familiar with that, because it is an Azure service out there that integrates with our other platforms, this is what it runs off of. And you can either trigger these to run manually, or you can have them running automatically based off of the incidents or alerts that Sentinel oversees. And so, as Sarah was talking about, the different scenarios or shoe sizes that organizations would fill within SOAR, the ones that always jump to my mind when an organization is just trying to get started are usually, for me, around, all right, where are immediate incidents or alerts that we're aware of that we need to communicate off of, maybe send it through our SOC communication channel, or if we need to enrich with a little bit more information like location or weather or information from our other platforms. Those are all great scenarios that you can address with Azure Sentinel playbooks. And so I do see a question that says, what are your thoughts on M365 security automation and remediation versus Sentinel playbooks for M365 workloads?
That's a good question. So there's certainly there certainly is a degree of overlap in those functions, in that you can take remediation action in Microsoft 365 security products and Sentinel. I guess, again, I'm going to give, and Jordan, you can give me your thoughts in a minute.
Yeah.
I'm going to sit on the fence a little bit here and say it really depends. Because how we feed things into Sentinel, and this goes into a bigger Sentinel discussion, but I'll try to keep it short. We do, if it's something where it's a quick fix and you just need to remediate something, and you're not, it may be more of a security misconfiguration, and you just want to fix it before the alert or the issue gets to Sentinel, then I think that's fine. I don't think there's a problem with that. However, Sentinel, of course, is taking alerts from all the different security products that you have in your environment. So Sentinel's got a bigger overview of what's happening. So the remediation you want to trigger in Sentinel is is when you've had a combination of alerts coming out of your various security products. Because, for example, you might see a user who's generating a lot of alerts, and it might be that it might be that we suspect the account has been breached, and it's coming from a malicious IP, and we'll talk more about this example later. But if that's the case, it might be better if you were just doing it, say, at the firewall level or the identity level. You may miss sort of the bigger picture, because an attacker probably hasn't just breached and targeted one aspect of security. So I think it really depends. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do it. And the really important thing here is to think about your use cases. What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, I think organizationally we have to think about where are our SOC analysts and where are our security engineers comfortable working in, where are they managing their resources. I think that's an important thing to think about. And another component is about what kind of context do you want to have within your automation too. And as Sarah was pointing out, Sentinel is aggregating information from a number of different data sources, internal to Microsoft and external, and enriching that with context such as entities and other alerts. And so if you want to factor those into your communication of the threat or your remediation of the threat, you might need to start in Sentinel to have that context within your automation. So it can be different for organizations, but you just need to think about what are you trying to automate and what information do you need to translate with it. And so within Sentinel and building these security playbooks, I mentioned that these run off of Logic Apps. In the back end of Logic Apps, they run off of JSON, so they are code-based, but you can create them completely using the Logic Apps graphical designer, which is a really great way to get started and an easy way to build them without much knowledge of how to automate, really. You can learn as you go.
Yeah. Jordan, we've got a question, and looks like it's got a lot of likes in the chat, so it's probably one that a lot of people want an answer to. But what is the difference between playbooks and Logic Apps?
I love this one. It comes up all the time, and it really addresses Azure Sentinel has security playbooks, and the playbooks run off of Azure Logic Apps. So Logic Apps are a service within Azure. They integrate with a number of different tools and services within the Azure portal. And so for those of y'all that use Azure Security Center or Azure Defender, you may have interacted with something like workflow automation or Logic Apps in another capacity. And so it's really the Azure service that's enabling these SOAR scenarios. But within the context of Sentinel, this is a security playbook. And so it's running off of Logic Apps, but within the context of Sentinel, we are responding to an alert or an incident, and that's why it's a playbook. Did I make it more confusing, or do you have a simple way of addressing it, Sarah?
All I say is, not dissimilar to you, Jordan, is that Logic Apps is the name of the Azure service, and a playbook is the individual flow or group of actions within that make the automation that run in Logic Apps. So a playbook is like the individual thing. Logic Apps is the actual service itself. But I know that you may find that sometimes Microsoft folks, we use them interchangeably a bit. We are guilty. I'm guilty of using those phrases interchangeably a bit. But that is officially what the difference is between the two.
And I think this might help too. So Azure Sentinel is one of the data connectors within Azure Logic Apps. And so when you're building an Azure Logic app, it is a collection of triggers and actions. And Sentinel is a trigger or an action for these Logic apps to actually get them enabled. And so the Azure Sentinel data connector within Logic Apps, not to be confused with data connectors in Sentinel, and I know that is a little confusing, but that is a way that you trigger and it really work with SOAR within the context of Azure Logic Apps. And so once again, it's a collection of triggers and actions, and it's really, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's really just writing your playbook to say, what do we recognize as a threat? How do we respond?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And hopefully as we go through the rest of this session, it'll become a bit clearer as well when we show you in the actual interface as well.
Mm-hmm. And so I already talked about that Azure Sentinel playbooks use logic apps and specifically use the connector for Azure Sentinel within the logic apps. And so this is really how you respond to the threats going forward. There are two major triggers, which I think we've called out just a couple times already. But do you want to talk us through the triggers and actions, Sarah?
I do, because these I do get people ask quite a lot, like, what is the difference between a Sentinel and a response to an Azure Sentinel alert and when an incident is created? And it's a great question. And to be honest with you, if I'm perfectly honest, when I first started working with Sentinel, I didn't really understand the difference either. So an alert is something of note, is something that's occurred that's of note in your environment. Now, when you're, you can create alerts within Sentinel, or you can receive alerts from other security products. Now, just because you get an alert, though, doesn't necessarily mean you want to create an incident. Sometimes you will and sometimes you won't. It might be that you only create an incident when you get a certain number of alerts or a certain combination of alerts. So that's why we have two different triggers. You can run automation when an alert happens, but not necessarily an incident, or you can run automation when an incident happens. So it may be, if you see an alert in its, just by itself, you might say, okay, if this happens, I want to run this type of automation. But then if you subsequently see a large number of those alerts, or a certain combination of alerts that to you might indicate something weird in your environment, then what you would do is say, okay, now I want to raise an incident because my security analysts need to get hands-on with this, and we're going to run this kind of automation instead. So yeah. Hopefully, so it is something that, because alerts and incidents, they don't sound necessarily different at first glance, but there are some subtle differences, and it does just give you a lot more flexibility in what you do in your security operations.
I think about the playbook that just sends an email, right? And so if you have an email sent to notify your SOC team that an alert has occurred, and you have one incident that's made up of 50 alerts that are all related to each other, do you want to send out those 50 individual emails representing those alerts, or one representing the security incident? And so there may be some scenarios where those are high-risk users and you want to be notified individually, but other scenarios where you want to reduce the amount of time that your SOC is actually filtering through each of those. And there's a number of actions here too. So once we actually develop this logic app or develop these security playbooks and have those triggers off of the incident or the alert, there's a number of ways that we can enrich information either within Sentinel or in other third-party data sources or connections. And we can also create some actions within Sentinel to add a comment or to adjust TI or add something to a watch list. Lots of different things that we can do. All right, I think it's time for a knowledge check.
Oh, let's do it.
All right.
So this is, everyone get ready, because you can vote too.
Yeah, so everyone, we are going to start off with some questions to make sure that what Sarah and I were just talking about in terms of what are Sentinel playbooks, what are logic apps, that this resonated. So I wish you all luck, and here we go. So question 1, an administrator needs to create an Azure Sentinel playbook. The administrator creates a logic app and starts Logic App Designer. Which of the following connectors should the administrator use as a trigger to your playbook? So we said admin a few times, so hopefully that doesn't throw you off. But Sarah, do you want to walk us through these answers?
Yeah, I do. So I'm going to go back to remembering when we used to do things like this at school. And so we're going to look at some keywords here. First of all, what we want to do here is we want to create a Sentinel playbook, and we want to, so we're asking, which connector should the admin use as a trigger? And I think they're the two key things. I can also see on the teleprompter what everyone's already answered.
Yeah,
but
I think just go for explaining the right answer at this point, just seeing the graphs ready.
Yeah, so it's Azure Sentinel Connector, and 90% of you who answered said that. So well done, you 90%. Good work. Because of course I think, we're doing an Azure Sentinel playbook. In order to trigger the playbook for Azure Sentinel, we need to have a Sentinel trigger. Otherwise, it would not trigger for Azure Sentinel. And it looks like most of you got that right. So good work.
Yes, you
For those of
didn't
you
fall
who
for the
didn't,
temptation of the administrator with Azure AD.
yeah, exactly. But congrats on all of you who got that right. Hopefully, those of you who didn't, makes sense. Why not? And let's go to the next question, Jordan.
Yep. So question 2, which of the following statements describes features of Azure Sentinel playbooks? So we have 3 options right here. Do you want to walk us through these ones while everyone's responding?
Yeah, so it could be, so the first one, Sentinel playbooks contain a set of continuous activities that always run in response to alerts. So maybe it's obviously talking about playbooks. B is the game catalog contains the latest Microsoft games. Like, I wish we were doing an Xbox session. That would be pretty cool, but we're not.
Let's secure Minecraft.
Yeah, secure Minecraft in an enclave. Security monitoring Minecraft. But I think we can probably, before I see the results, I think we can discount B. And then we have for C, collections of procedures based on Azure Logic apps that run in response to an alert. Now, so I think definitely it's between A and C here. What do you think, Jordan? Any thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about efficiency, I'm thinking of budget, and A scares me. That it is constantly running and constantly analyzing, and for every alert out there, I just look at A as an expensive solution right here.
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to go with C.
All right, and there you had it. The correct answer was C. Yes, it is a collection of procedures. One might call it a playbook, and it runs off of Azure Logic Apps. So I hope you are all able to follow along and grab that one too. So the next thing that we want to talk about is how to trigger a playbook in real time. And so to trigger a playbook, we're going to definitely get more into this with the demonstrations as we go through, but Sentinel makes it really easy to manage these logic apps, which again is the back end of the Azure Sentinel playbooks, but to manage all of those within one place. So within our Sentinel instance, we actually have a blade that is called playbooks. And so within playbooks, we can see all of our security-related logic apps, so these Sentinel playbooks in one place. And we can also see, how many times they ran successfully. In my case, when I'm building a new playbook, how many times it fails until I get it right. And we can create a new one. We can trigger them from here too. And so this is just a really great way to manage all of this automation from one place. And so when you actually are creating a new playbook, what we referenced earlier was we have a logic app designer tool. And so you don't have to work through the JSON. Sarah, do you make playbooks using JSON?
No.
I haven't met anyone that has.
No, I don't. I have, in full confession, I have taken a playbook template and maybe tweaked a little bit of the JSON just because it was easier, but most of the time it is not. And I certainly cannot write things. I could not write an entire playbook in JSON without a considerable amount of pain and help from other people.
I just want my life to be as easy as possible. And having this graphical interface and these triggers like the one that I'm showing you right here, where we can link to Azure Sentinel as a data source within the Logic app and associate it with an identity, right? So automation can't exist without the permissions. We need to give it either a managed service principal or we need to associate it with our own identity. And so that way we can connect to Sentinel, we can interact with the data, we can actually integrate that with our mailbox and other things as you need. And that's through the actions here. And so you can build these playbooks graphically, link it with your identity. My recommendation is store this in the same resource group as your Azure Sentinel workspace. That way it's easy to manage these and delegate permissions out to these as well. And you can just build logically this flow of how you should respond to a threat. And so I'm sure you're familiar with just a short snippet of what this screenshot is, Sarah, in terms of building this playbook. It's one that we
Yeah,
like a bit.
I've seen it many times before. This is the Logic Apps Designer, and it is, yeah, it's lovely GUI based way of doing things, and we'll show you it in a bit more depth shortly. Yeah. But it's a really, really nice tool, and very easy to pick up if you haven't used it before. And as Jordan said earlier, if you've used MS Flow, this is going to look pretty familiar to you.
And as you're going through and actually building these, the logic apps or these Sentinel playbooks are a collection of steps, really. And so as you're building them up, you have a trigger, the new instance of an Azure Sentinel alert. You have actions that respond to it, maybe loops and conditions, but it is built off of these fields or these parameters, which you can dynamically or graphically work with too. And so this dynamic content of being able to pull in something like the alert display name, we don't have to write that in JSON. You can just pull this dynamic content right there and actually filter these into conditional statements. So you can build these playbooks not to run every single time you see an alert or an incident, but you can actually build some criteria here as you're going through. And so once you've created these logic apps, they're going to be in one place.
Jordan, I think this would be a good time, if you don't mind, for me to steal the screen off you, because
sure.
I think it would be nice just to be able to show those people who are watching a little bit in a little bit more detail what you're talking about there. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to share my screen and we'll have a look and just show everyone who's watching what we're actually talking about there. So hopefully the screen can swap over in a second.
Okay. I haven't seen it quite yet, but...
No, I haven't.
I think a demo is definitely in order to show this content. And so just until... Oh, there it goes.
How's that? We can see it. We can see it.
There we are.
Sweet. So just to kind of expand more on what Jordan was saying. And so here we have at the beginning, when a response to an Azure Sentinel alert is triggered, what we're doing. So you can see here there's a flow of steps. So what we're going to do in this example is I'm going to open an incident in ServiceNow. So if you're using ServiceNow as your ticketing system, you might want to not just have an incident in Sentinel, you might want to have one in ServiceNow if that's where your centralized IT ops reporting comes from. Again, we're just using example applications here. Please remember, ServiceNow is not the only ticketing system. Teams is not the only messaging system. This is just an example. We're also going to post a message into the SOC channel. So as Jordan was talking about that dynamic content. So when an incident's triggered, when an alert's triggered, it's going to post a message that says, new alert from Sentinel, please investigate ASAP. And the severity, that's the dynamic content. We'll take that from the alert. We'll take the name and the description so your team know about it. Then we're going to send an approval email. The email, again, is going to have some of that dynamic content, and it's going to tell us the severity, the name, etc. And here what we're doing is sending an approval email. So we're going to send two different approval emails. We're going to send two options, which is block user and IP and ignore. So when we get down here, we've got our condition. So when the person who gets emailed or the team email gets emailed and the user responds, if they respond with block user and IP, we go to the true branch. And what we'll do here is we're going to take the account from the alert, and then we're going to block that user in Azure AD. And we're also going to take the IP address from that alert, and we're going to send that IP address.
As you're going through, everyone can see that this is all dynamic content. You really didn't have to write anything, and you're able to respond to a threat and block an IP address.
Yeah, exactly. So if we went to the false branch, if they said ignore, then we will close the incident in ServiceNow, and then we'll close the incident in Sentinel. So we're just tidying up. And that sounds like a thing that's not necessarily worth mentioning, but I'm sure if any of you have worked in IT for any amount of time, you know that we can end up with a lot of waste and mess. And so you can use automation just to keep your environment tidy and neat so that your SOC analysts have a nice, tidy environment. They're not looking or spending time working out whether an incident is worth looking at, etc. Anything to add there, Jordan?
Just that when I got started using Logic Apps, and at that time it was in the context of Azure Defender, the best advice that a colleague gave to me was think about the outcome you want and work back from there. And so if we think about the outcome that we want to validate that this is a true positive threat, and if it is true that we want to make sure that that IP address is blocked from our environment, then we can work our way back from there. How do we get to that information and work our way back? So if you ever get stuck, just try to look at it from that different perspective. But what do you think about going to a knowledge check now?
I think so. There's one question that we had in the chat that I wanted to answer just before we do that, Jordan.
Yeah.
One of the folks watching has asked, so can we say that a Sentinel playbook is SOAR? I think we can. What do you think?
I think we can. And there's also a really great session that was with Sarah Fender that's available on demand, as well as a blog on Sentinel that talks about a new addition within Sentinel, which is built-in automation. And so there are ways that you can automate these responses, another component of SOAR that's completely within the UI. It's not within building a logic app, but there are certain scenarios that will be automated through that fashion. So definitely playbooks are SOAR, but more to come.
Okay. And yeah, let's go to knowledge check.
Okay. Knowledge check it is. Let me share my screen. And here we go. Question number 3. What is dynamic content in a logic app?
Oh. Well, in case you're gonna say, hopefully everyone, this is a test if you were just paying attention to like the last few minutes, I guess. But let's go through the possible answers here. So, dynamic content in a logic app could be a list of dynamically selected threats. It could be a list of dynamic inputs for users, a list of dynamic inputs for the current action, or it could be a list of dynamic users. So if we have a look at that, dynamically selected threats doesn't make too much sense, really, because we're not dynamically selecting threats. We use dynamic content in the logic app to respond to threats.
And Sarah, actually, we have, 96% of our audience already with the correct answer.
Go. I hadn't looked across my other screen to see what people had said. So maybe you folks don't need me to explain this one. Sounds like most of you got it right.
Seems like we're following along. And so y'all got it right. It's a list of dynamic inputs for the current action in it. It can be entities associated to users. It can be specific things related to threats, but dynamic content is just those parameters, those fields, those schema that make up our data at the end of the day that we can interact with logic apps. All right, next question. Question 4, an administrator creates a new playbook to receive a notification each time a user is delegated the role of global admin. Which connector should the administrator select in the logic app? So how do you feel about this instance where we have potentially a number of global admins being created?
Wow, having global admin created willy-nilly around your environment is definitely not a good thing. Even if it's not, even for those of you who aren't aware, global admin is pretty much God mode in Azure.
High level of permissions. You can do a lot.
You can tell I used to play a lot of video games when I was younger with the phrases that I use. But basically, it's a very, very, very high level of permission. And you can do everything. You have no restrictions, essentially. So the potential impact of someone who shouldn't have that level of access in your environment can be very, very severe. So it's certainly a really good idea to have that notification if someone's being delegated, just for your information.
The best use for the audience just looking at the answers here is talk about answer A. What do you think about that one?
Answer A. So I can see why people have gone for answer A, because we're talking about global admin. And I can see, because the phrasing of this question can be tricky, that because you want to receive a notification, it's about an Azure AD thing. So I can see logically why folks have selected that. But we're not wanting to take action. If we were wanting to take action within Azure AD, then we would probably want to use the AAD connector. But we're actually only saying we want a notification, and the notification will come from Sentinel. So in fact, what we're looking at is probably C. So I know that was a tricky one.
Yeah,
that was a tricky one. And actually 60% of you said A. I understand why. I think it's a tricky question in the way it's phrased, but I think the main key thing to look at, also, full confession, the first time I saw these questions, I thought it was A as well. And then, so please don't feel bad. But although we're getting our information from Azure AD, we're not taking any action. So the logic app wouldn't need to connect in any way to Azure AD.
Yeah, and the contextual keyword here is playbook and not logic app. And so it's within the context of Sentinel that we're looking at this.
Yeah, but tricky question.
Very tricky. All right, moving on. Let's learn about running playbooks on demand. Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about, now that we've created playbooks, how do we actually use them?
Yeah, sure. So as we know, Sentinel allows you to run playbooks on demand. So if you're doing an investigation, you might want to run a playbook during that investigation. We've also got ways that we can support that as well. So let's do you want to move on to the next slide there, Jordan? There's a couple of ways we can do this. We can either run it on demand based on the incident details, we can trigger specific steps as part of the investigation, or you can do remediation action. And I always think this is a good place for me to I'm a pure demo girl, as you know, Jordan. So I'm going to steal the screen off you for a second, and I'm going to just show you folks what we mean here, because I think it's always really useful to have a look to help visualize what's happening. So I'm going to look at my incidents here, and what we can see here is we've got a number of incidents coming in. Let me just move that. So we've got a ton of incidents coming in here. There's lots of activity in our subscription, and I'm going to take one of these. And what we're going to do is look at the full details of this particular incident. So we can see here that we've got a suspicious volume of logins to a computer. There's one alert associated with this, but actually 6 events. And if we come over here, so we might know that if there's, I'll just move this out so you can all read it. If we know that there's been a suspicious volume of logins to a computer, we might know that we want to take action on that right away. So we can come over here, click View Playbooks, and it's going to take us to all of our alert playbooks. And then I can set, it might be we want to isolate that machine. So we can actually do that here by running this playbook and clicking isolate machine. Now, depending on what the alert is will depend on what you want to do here. And it's still better to run automation in this way than completely do it manually. Because if I had to go in either to Azure or MDATP and click, or Defender for Endpoint, I beg your pardon, we would have to click through all these different things, and it could be manual and time consuming, whereas I could just hit run here and it would be much quicker, and because people make mistakes, they just do, it's much more consistent as well.
And 2 best practices here. One is, if you know the type of incident or the analytic rule that you would actually use that automation with, attach it in the analytic rule template itself. So open up the analytic rule and then go to automation and just link that playbook with that analytic rule. But the other best practice is let's not create things when we don't have to. If y'all remember, I want my life to be easy, and there is an amazing Sentinel community out here. And Sarah, you have an interesting role within this community. Do you want to talk to us about it?
I very much do. So we do have here the Azure Sentinel GitHub repo. If you've never gone to look at it, please do. It is run by Microsoft Engineering, and we have contributions from both Microsoft Engineering, our partners, our customers. And what I really want to draw attention to here is, of course, playbooks. So I have a very, as Jordan said, I have a very important role. I'm one of the moderators for playbooks. You can see I was actually the last person to merge something.
Every time I look at the screen, you are at the top of this.
I am. I'm at the top. So what we have here is there's a huge number of playbooks. I'll just, if you just see.
Yeah, and I saw mine that you just scrolled up or scrolled past. It's the comment remediation steps.
Yeah, we'll look at yours, Jordan. We know you want to like give a bit of a shout out to yours. We
Always
know.
A shout out that I built with Nicholas here.
Yeah. So what we do, there's a huge gallery of playbooks in here. All of the playbooks that you find in this repo, if they weren't created by Microsoft, they have been reviewed by Microsoft Engineering, so they should work really nicely. And they have a lot of common use cases. Now, I know that I said earlier, it's not that one size fits all necessarily for playbooks, but we do see a lot of common use cases. So even if it doesn't exactly match what you want to do, you might be able to steal some of it and tweak it. And I'm a big fan of not reinventing the wheel if you can possibly help it.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see, if I just scroll down so you can see here, that every single playbook in this gallery, it will have an ARM template. So you'll see that button that you can see on screen here that says deploy to Azure or deploy to Azure Gov. So if you click on that, just like I showed you when we were creating our Sentinel instance right back at the beginning of the session, it will actually take you to the ARM template and automatically deploy it. So if I click here on deploy to Azure for Jordan's, for example, it will again take us to the customized template screen. Again, I'll have to pick my resource group, what region I want the playbook deployed in, what name we want it to be, the username we're using, and the parameters that you see here will of course change depending on the precise logic app you're using. But again, a really nice way to get started with things that other people have created.
And one more thing to call out about this, as you can see in the customized deployment, it said 3 resources. And
yes.
The 3 resources that it's deploying is not only the logic app, so the actual SOAR that we're going to use, but it's also going to deploy connections to the Azure Sentinel platform, connections to the log analytics workspace. And so we need to be able to configure the identities for those connections, as we talked about earlier. And so it will deploy those for you, and all you have to do is open up the Logic App Designer or the API connection and fill in the identity.
Yeah.
What do you think about oh, sorry, Sarah.
I was just going to say, so if you go to the JSON for every playbook that you can see in the repo, if you go right down to the bottom, here's a pro tip for you. You'll see here in parameters, we have those connections that Jordan was talking about. So when you use the ARM template and it says 3 resources, one resource is the playbook itself. The other 2 resources are these 2 connections here. So it's always the number of connections plus 1 that you'll see for resources. So don't be, as Jordan said, don't be scared when we're not deploying loads and loads of things. It's just how Azure displays the connections in the playbook.
Absolutely. So we do have a quick knowledge check to make sure that y'all were still with us. So let me bring that up. All right. First question. An administrator wants to attach a playbook to an existing incident and starts to investigate the incident. Which option should the administrator select to attach the playbook? And so I'm just going to talk through this one if you don't mind,
Yeah,
Sarah.
yeah. Everyone will be bored of me talking through it. Please do.
It's my turn to respond to these test questions.
I'm going
So,
to ask you the next question, I think. Let's do it that way.
all right. So the first one says new. There's nothing to really respond to there. It's kind of a confusing, isolated instance where we're not saying, every time there's a new incident, we're going to respond to a threat. And then additionally, there's this unassigned area. We're not going to respond with a playbook every time we have an unassigned incident. And so really the place that we start, which Sarah demoed, was when we open up an incident, we click on its name, and then we click view full details, view the playbooks associated with it, or that can be, and then we click run from there. And so C, name of the incident, is really the only place that we can get started here.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, and yet pretty much 85% of you got that right. So well done.
Awesome.
Hopefully it makes sense for those of you who didn't quite get the answer right that time, why the answer is C. But thanks everyone for voting.
All right, question 6.
Okay, so question 6, my turn to ask the question.
I'm a student.
Okay. So question 6, you want to search for a suitable threat detection query or a workbook that you can use for your requirements. Where can you search for such items, Jordan? Can you remember?
I think I can remember this. I think you're the moderator of it and that we just discussed it, but just for the sake of the others. All right, yes. Starting with answer B, Microsoft Learn. We did have a deployment there. We had the deploy to Azure. That would be a mess to work through if we wanted to find templates hidden in Microsoft Learn content. And so I don't think that's the right kind of repository, one might say, for it. I don't even know what Azure Architecture Center is. I'm sure it's lovely, but it's also not that one.
I don't know what it is either.
So it has to be C, Azure Sentinel Repository on GitHub. This is our Sentinel community, a collection of our templates in folders specified for data connectors, analytic rules. You can contribute to it. Sarah will moderate it, and then I can use it. We can all benefit.
Exactly. I will ask you to put a deploy to Azure button on it more often than not. But yeah, most of you got that right. So well done for those of you who voted. I see more people actually voted on that question than some of the other ones. So I don't know. Well, maybe it helped that we literally just talked about it before we did the knowledge check.
That may have helped just a little bit. So I think it's time for another demo. And within this demo, I want to talk to y'all about creating an Azure Sentinel playbook. So I'm going to talk through creating a playbook, and then also Sarah already talked about how you can create it using the GitHub repository. Whenever you're thinking, I need some SOAR in my SOC or using Sentinel, I always recommend starting from the playbooks folder within that Sentinel community and looking if there's already a template there, because there's probably a great one for you to use completely or to tweak just a little bit. And if there's not, you can open up an issue for Sarah to review and say, hey, I need some SOAR over here. And
don't do that. No, please do. In all seriousness, if you're having issues or if you want to contribute, please do. We love to see your contributions and we want to help you. So even if it's your first time and you're a newbie, we're not going to destroy you. Don't be scared. If there are a few mistakes or it isn't deploying properly, that happens to, I even have to tell Microsoft people. So, please go for it.
Yes. And so in order to create one from scratch, as the MS Learn content takes us through, what you need to do is go down to playbooks right here. And so underneath configuration, just select playbooks. Opening that up, we will be able to see the screenshot that I showed y'all just a little bit earlier, where it is a collection of all of our security playbooks within one place where we can manage them and see the runtime. I have some lovely load time going on, but once you're over here to follow the MS Learn content, we want to create a new playbook from scratch. So all we have to do is click Add Playbook. And when we do, it will bring us to this screen where, similar to the resource deployments that Sarah's shown us, we need to fill in our details for, the test logic app that we are going to deploy. Best practice again, have this in the same resource group as your Azure Sentinel workspace, and then we can review and create it. Doing that, we'll deploy the logic app, we can navigate over to that resource, and then all we have to do is select create a blank logic app. It gives us a clean slate of what to start with. More often than not, that's how you're going to be building them, not off of the built-in Azure templates that it has for logic apps. But if those do come in handy, by all means, use them. And so what I want to show you is that logic app that I built that Sarah showed you. The logic app that the MS Learn content goes through is about seeing a deleted VM activity occurring and then closing the incident. It's a great one to be able to test and see instant results, but it might not be the most efficient playbook for you to actually utilize within your SOC, because more often than not, you would just click close on that incident rather than hitting run playbook on that one. So the playbook that I created right here, comment remediation steps, I'm going to open that one up for y'all to just take a look at what it appears to be while I sign in on another screen. What that playbook is going to do is it's going to recognize any time that a alert has occurred where you manually run this, and it is going to tell you whether it has to do with Azure Defender or Microsoft Defender for endpoint. And if it does create that connection, those platforms have a remediation step guidance for you. So it actually tells you how to respond to the threat. So the instance of this playbook is we want to give our SOC analysts the steps to actually respond to the threat. So not only understand what happened, but how they need to prevent the attack from further occurring and to prevent it from the future or in the future. And so moving through this playbook, as we open up the conditions, we can see how we use dynamic content, put in some parameters to associate with the specific products that we want, and then have a for each loop to look through that alert and say anytime it's related to Microsoft Defender for endpoint, add this comment in and associate that with the incident. Now let's look at how this runs. And so looking at Sentinel again, I'm going to go to an incident. So within threat management, I'm going to click on incidents. And within incidents, I am going to filter based off of products because I know the playbook that I created is relevant to Microsoft Defender for endpoint and relevant to Azure Defender. So I'm only going to select Azure Defender here. In your real world SOC, you would wait for that high severity or medium severity incident to appear, and then you would work off of that. And then scrolling through here, I see a number of sample alerts. I'm not going to click on one of those. It's a great feature of Azure Defender. But throughout here, I will find, I believe there is a great one on a brute force attack, SSH, failed brute force attack.
Oh, that's never a good thing.
Not a good thing. And so we want to know how to respond to this threat right away. So as Sarah showed us, we click View Full Details, and then we scroll to the right where we can see View Playbooks. Clicking there, this will open up that playbooks view that I have where I can search through to see what is the proper playbook that I should utilize. Click Run. That triggered successfully. So I'm going to go back to the incident, hit refresh, and you can see that it created this remediation step guidance right here, where I can actually respond to that threat. And you can see I did it twice because I did this earlier just in case.
That shows you're prepared, Jordan. I too got up very early to rerun my demos before the session. So
yes, we always have to prepare when we're doing something live that we have our backup. And so what I demoed right there is just how we can manually trigger a playbook and instantly see its results within our instant view, empowering our SOC analysts, and to really bring Sora to the masses. And so the MS Learn content, what it's going to do is it's essentially going to run a playbook that is just going to change this status to closed, which is great to test, maybe not too realistic for your SOC, but definitely play around with it. And after we're done with this session, you can go into the MS Learn content and try it out yourself. So now that we've done that demo, just in summary, hopefully within this MS Learn session, you were able to learn how to create a Sentinel playbook and be able to respond to a threat in real time or trigger them manually or on demand in response to a security alert. Sarah, did you learn these? Were you already on top of it?
I feel like I probably was, but that's a good thing, being that we were presenting the learning module.
Yes.
So, but I do really enjoy, what I love about these is that we get to understand, we get to see all the questions from all of you wonderful people around the world watching, because it helps us develop more content to understand where, you know, what your questions are and how you need to learn. So yeah, thank you all for interacting with us today as well.
And if this wasn't enough for you and you've reviewed our recording 5 times plus and you want more content, you can go over to the short link to view the Learn module, follow along with it, and make sure that you can replicate SOAR and bring it within your organization. And be sure to submit an evaluation to let Sarah and I know if we were stellar and amazing, or if we have room to become stellar and amazing, and you have the tips to get us there. We want to know. Additionally, there is Learn Live, which you can follow along with for more content and similar sessions like this. So going on right now is a Microsoft Ignite Cloud Skills Challenge, which you can take part in by completing any or all of the 7 collections of content or challenges to earn a free certification exam. So the challenge is live now and it runs through March 30th. And so whether you focus on the collection based off of M365 Enterprise Admin, Azure Admin, a Teams Admin, Security Operations Analyst, who I interact with the most, and maybe Sarah too, you can take part in this challenge and get some free certification exams. I wish it was just a free certification, but...
Yeah, that would be good.
That would be nice.
Not even for Microsoft people. We have to take the exams too.
We have to take them. Even if we write them, we still have to take them.
Yes, we do.
Yes. And so, again, thank you all for joining us today at the Learn Live session and other Learn Live sessions that have been occurring at Ignite. But as they say, that's not all. So we're excited to announce that starting on March 15th, Learn Live, which you're all joining us in today, is going to be launching a new weekly live streaming show over on Learn TV. So a new TV network for you at home. Learn TV, like we did today, each episode will cover a Learn module and work with experts to cover the Learn content in depth with live Q&A. I'm always a little uncomfortable when I describe myself as an expert, but you know, Sarah, you are an expert out here, so.
No. Yeah, I feel just as uncomfortable as you do, Jordan, sometimes. There's a bit of imposter syndrome for both of us, I think.
Well, we are going to be starting the show by looking at Azure SQL fundamentals, another probably great duo of experts right there. But with over 2,000 topics in Microsoft Learn, we will be covering all manner of things going forward. Lots of content to address here. So if you want to take part in Learn TV, starting March 15th, mark your calendars, come join us, and get a real live look at the Learn modules, bring them to life a little. Okay.
And so we've got a teeny bit of time left. So what we've got a couple of minutes left, and so we were just going to answer a few more questions.
Questions.
Yeah, we have some questions. Now we have a really good question, and I really do want to cover this off before we finish. One of our guests said, I can't find my SaaS solution in the list of Logic App connectors. So how do I use playbooks for a service that doesn't have a connector in Logic Apps?
Yes, and so we talked about how Logic Apps have all of these connectors, and you can search Sentinel on it, you can search ServiceNow as you showed, or Palo Alto, the list goes on. But if you don't have your SaaS application out there, you are definitely not out of luck. You can use the HTTP action, use your APIs, and bring in that data. So.
Yeah. And actually, if I could just steal the screen for a second,
Sure.
I can actually show you that. So here's one I prepared earlier. So this is our HTTP data connector. So hopefully your SaaS solution will probably have APIs. The chances are it does. So as long as your SaaS solution has APIs, what you can do is use the HTTP data connector. You can do a get, a put, a post, a delete, whatever you need to do. Typically, actually, it depends. I would say typically it would be a get, but actually probably not for remediation. We put in the URI. Of course, there are other parameters if you need authentication. Hopefully you do. And then what we can do is pass the JSON response. It's a really easy way of doing it. You just provide a sample payload. And so if you're bringing a response in from your API, you would pass the JSON. If you're pushing a response to the API, slightly different, but certainly you're not out of luck, as Jordan says. The HTTP connector here is kind of a catch-all. So as long as you've got an API for your SaaS solution, which I would hope it does, you could still interact with it using Logic Apps. So hopefully that answered your question. It's a really good one. And so thanks for bringing it up.
Yes, and the parse JSON isn't as intimidating of a step as it looks like. All you have to do is run this Logic App prior to that. And that HTTP action will actually give you the sample output that you can just copy and paste into here.
Yeah, that's a really good question that I did just want to finish off with there. I think, Jordan, someone asked, is there a separate cost to use SOAR or playbooks with Sentinel? Good question.
There is. Logic Apps is a separate Azure service with its own billing model based off of actions and runtime. And so there was that one knowledge check question when it said it's going to run continuously on every alert. And my eyes got wide and said, that's expensive. And so it's because every time these actions run, even though I've heard from customers this cost isn't that much, but if it's just running all the time, that bill can get up there. So there is a separate cost.
Yes, it's per action within your Logic app. And as Jordan said, it's not large, but if you're running it a lot of actions and you're running it very frequently, then of course it does accumulate over time.
All right. And Sarah, I think we are just at time. So I think we have to close up. But I just wanted to read one comment. The best session yet on Ignite 2021. Thank you so much. ! Question mark. What a mystery to leave off at. But thank you everyone for joining. It's been a pleasure. I get to sit and talk with Sarah and review your comments throughout this time. It's my favorite activity of this week. I wish it could happen every week. But thank you everyone. Sarah, anything you want to say goodbye?
I think I'll just say goodbye. Thank you all for your attention. Thanks for your comments and interacting with us. Hopefully you found this session useful. Enjoy the rest of your Ignite and have a good rest of your day. Stay safe wherever you are in the world. And thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.